All right, welcome everybody to Tuesday night's workshop on boosting your immune system. I'm Dr. Kristen Zawada, and welcome to Monarch Family Chiropractic's final workshop of the week. We are going to talk through some factors of how your immune system and how important it plays a role in your communication between your brain and your body and your nervous system, and how adaptive it is to the stressors we experience and the things that bombard our system in life, and how amazing it is at protecting us from the world out there. And so we're going to dive right into a story. Let's see if I can get my arrows to work. Give me one second. There it goes. We talk about the germ theory a lot and addressing what that means, and the misconceptions of what people think about with germs. And we talk about, does the germ really cause the disease? And this is a story that would be fascinating for you to look up if you've not heard of them. This is from a very long time ago, but it was a set of conjoined twins. So Dasha and Masha were sisters, obviously, joined at birth this way, and they experienced very different things, which is why they were such a great case in the sense to study from how the immune systems and their brains and their bodies worked when they had some parts that they shared and others that they didn't. So they both had a circulatory system and a piece of parts, most of their digestive system, how they the excretory, so how they excrete, all of our waste products, the lymphatic system, the endocrine system, which is our chemical system in our body, and much of their skeletal system, as you can see, were very much shared. And what wasn't shared was their brain and their spinal cord and the spinal column. So it's really interesting to see with what they had that was unique to them, for as much as that they shared, how different their health was, how different with what they both did as they became older and adults. They lived a life much longer than you would think, being joined this way for their life. One of the twins, as it talks about there in the slide, was always very sick and prone to colds, had different issues with eyesight, and other sister was a lot less different in how her health was, had good eyesight, had changes in blood pressure, was a smoker. I can't imagine being attached to someone who the person that was a foot from you your whole life smoked, and you didn't. But there were very much differences to how in which they led some of their individual pieces of their behavior, and how different it was that they expressed health. So I think that there were things that whether they went through things together or not, with everything they did, because they were literally never ever separated, that they didn't experience the same types of things like, bacteria, virus type germs at the same time. So that just talks to the fact that the immune system is so important in how your body regulates, and that it doesn't even mean for congenital twins that they experience the same thing at the same time. So a healthier immune system experiencing something different, responding to something different, will then have a different outcome than someone literally attached to them, sharing many of the exact same systems of the body in function. So very fascinating story to look up and read more about them. So as we get more into the immune system and really how it's driven, it's, we talk all the time in the office about the safety pin cycle, right? How the safety pin is like, when you think about the top and the bottom of the feedback loop of the brain and the rest of the system being a fluid system. The signal has to leave your brain, go down through your nervous system, make it through every part and piece of your body, and then send a signal back up, right? So an afferent and efferent system that has to communicate both directions to get a signal out and take that signal of what the body did and express it back up to the brain to let it know what we did, to really complete the loop. And that's how really the body and the brain and the nervous system work, and how your immune system is a part of that. Is it's a lot of that connection between the two. The immune system is very dynamic, and so it plays a big part in what we do when we're supporting how the system functions. It supports the healthier immune system, and we'll go into more of why. But when you have a connected system, then that nervous system and immune system can then communicate to the brain more properly, and you have a better outcome, right? You have a more effective and efficient outcome in how you function. And so with that, we talk about a lot about chiropractic's role in that, right? And how we're releasing that interference to allow those systems to work and communicate more effectively. So as we go further into that, we talk about chiropractic care and why that's so important and why that's such a huge component to immune system and why we talk so much about that. And that is because of the research that's out there showing the understanding of the brain and the immune system and how they're the most two adaptive systems in our body. And so during an immune response, give me 1 second here. Okay, back it up. During an immune response, so brain and immune system are very much talking to each other. They're processing what the body needs to maintain balance, right? So what we call homeostasis, or that yin and that yang of the system. The body has to go through that process in order to cycle through something. And so the communication path has to be there. And a lot of research is done in chiropractic and in lots of other medical journals too, relating chiropractic care with white blood cell count, and we'll talk about that here in a second. About that all has to do with, you know, flus and viruses and colds and things that the body experiences and has to combat because it's foreign, as well as a lot of things that have to do with measuring blood pressure and a lot of regulation of that because of how the immune system and the nervous system play such an important role in adapting and balancing out the other systems of the body. So there's a couple studies that we're going to talk about here. One was a huge study that was done that a lot of people talk about with when you're experiencing a lot of physical symptoms. And they show that on an average of several thousand that were undergoing care, that when you have, you know, when you can say about an average of 15% of people who are experiencing issues or discomfort or physical symptoms that had anything to do from poor ranges of motion, how often they had colds and flus and got virally sick, digestive issues, which again, a lot of inflammation, allergies, dizziness, falls, a lot of all that falls into the perspective of the upper cervical spine, right? So everything that's more connected and closer to the brain. So that's an area that when there's a lot of disconnect, you see a lot of those similar symptoms that are in this study. But it really talked about how a significant amount of people had a reduced symptomatology in because they were adjusted and they were connecting more of that system and boosting the immune system. So when we talk about the immune system, a lot of things were looked at and studied way back in the day when the big flu epidemics happened. And Davenport, Iowa is where chiropractic originated, but with the Palmers, and they had a very big clinic that was kind of like a hospital, and there were other ones around the area that were more medically based hospitals. And in the percentage of these studies, the people that were seen, they literally were turning the stadiums and the gymnasiums of some of the universities and schools in Iowa into like mobile hospitals for periods of time because there were so many people that were sick. So when people were being seen, there was obviously not the same amount of people being seen by chiropractors, but in relation to percentages, there was a lot of higher death rates that were happening for people that were mostly under medical care and didn't have any version of a naturopathic healthcare option. And so most of what was available then, and especially in that area, because that's where the Palmers were, and chiropractic hadn't branched out of that area at that point yet. There was a lot of doctors seeing a lot of cases in chiropractic with very, very, very few deaths when you look at 1 in 15 versus 1 in almost 900 with cases that had some chiropractic care involved. Back in the day when things were very much just starting, chiropractic's been around since the late 1800s, so that wasn't too far after its inception. And in addressing things with chiropractic and the flu. There were other states where you saw similar kinds of studies. When people were under care, there was only a very small percentage of people passing or dying from flu type symptoms or cases. Then there were people in a sense of being reported in under only medical treatment. Cases of people seeing chiropractors had a higher percentage rate of just complete recovery in these couple cases from early 1900s to late 1900s. as we go into now really addressing it from the perspective of immunity and what we were talking about with white blood cells. We know the benefits of different parts of the white blood cells that I won't go into the deep science words of all of that, but that are really the pieces of how our immune system processes and how it has to function. So from pulmonary stuff and heart and lung to the areas of the spine that, areas of the body that produce that immune system response. So the white blood cells, excuse me, a little gnat in the office. White blood cells are what we have referred to as like our killer T cells. They are our fighting cells, and they are what combat something that's foreign in the system. And so there's studies that we reference here, and there's many of them, but we talk about the response of when an adjustment was applied to that middle center of the back. You see that in taking a blood sample 15 minutes before and within 30 minutes of an adjustment, we see the increased uptake of the white blood cells that are showing up within that time frame of the adjustment. And so we know that the body produces a response to protect itself, in the sense of it stimulates those white blood cells to say, hey, anything that's not me, that's foreign within the system, it's got a higher ability at that time with that higher blood cell rate to be on alert for them. So it's why when you come into the office, or when you've ever come in the office or called in and said, hey, I'm not feeling well, I'm not sure if I should come in. I've got the cold, I've got a little flu, I've got the sniffles, tummy ache, whatever it is, that we always say, obviously this last few years, checking in to see what you may feel as far as symptoms, and being mindful of being around other people. We always encourage that you come in, because we know that the adjustment is helping support this immune system and helping boost that immunity in that process to fight off the infection, right? To fight off the virus, bacteria, whatever it is that your body's experiencing, and to bring it back into more of that balance and homeostasis that it must do in order to process through something, recognize it as foreign, go ahead and attack it as foreign, get rid of it and flush it through the rest of the system that excretes things that aren't us, and produce a healthier cell that replaces it. So that we all know gets a boost every time we get adjusted. So why it's so important to get adjusted when you don't feel well, not just when you do. Oh, my screen just froze again. Give me 1 second. There we go. There's also a piece where we talk about the respiratory health, right? So the function of our lungs that in some of this research that's done is talking about how we get this enhanced experience. They call it a respiratory burst, and that is following an adjustment as well. So it's studying at the cell level things that burst is needed in the immune cells to basically destroy or push out a virus or bacteria. So it's a response that the body experiences and has following an adjustment. There's also been studies done with patients that experience other immune responses and inflammatory responses, such as HIV positive patients, and looking at when adjustments have been delivered to the upper part of the spine, so more of that neck area, over a period of time. The group that had received care had almost a 50% increase in the cellular type that helps really support their immune system. That is really important for that process when you have a condition like HIV, and you're battling that kind of a virus that lives within your system all the time. So seeing multiple types of viral or inflammatory responses that a body responds very positively to when adjusted and when getting that immune boost. So we're going to cover a few things that you can do to support your body and also support the immune system in functioning at its best and at its highest. This lecture got a little bit more tailored with the last 2 years we've had and what COVID has introduced into us studying and seeing how our body responds to things that are doing similar things we've just talked about, attacking respiratory systems for especially more elderly patients, and what kind of, and obviously the immune system itself. So what type of things that we can help boost in our systems that support us in those types of viruses that usually attack more of those types of our systems, or more heavily seem to be attacking our systems that way. So we looked at vitamin D has been really huge in some of the recent studies with COVID, but I think it's across the board been studied forever in relation to flu and virus. So talking about the dependency of, there's over 2,000 genes that include vitamin K dependent proteins that repair genes. So vitamin D helps activate those and helps that in supporting and producing things that are antiviral and antibacterial, which is very important in combating something that's viral or bacterial in our system that's foreign. It also has been very shown to help in working towards cancers, breast, prostate, respiratory viruses. So, you know, the pneumonia, bronchitis, and then things that go into flu. Let's go into the next slide where there's more of the detail I'm wanting. So when it comes to different things that we can do, vitamin D is huge, and it also needs to be comboed, if you will, with magnesium. I know when we were doing the nutrition talk a few weeks ago, we talked about calcium, magnesium, and how important that is to have together as the right proper ratio, because they help each other absorb and benefit from better. It's very similar with vitamin D and magnesium. And magnesium is required to convert vitamin D to a way that is active form for our body. So very important that those ones, I feel like, are very synergistic, that we get together, especially if we're going to be supplementing and taking them through a supplement versus naturally through either foods and or things like vitamin D that we get from sunshine and from being outside. So for those people that do dairy and things like that, there are, you know, egg yolks, cheese, you know, grass-fed butters, things that vitamin D comes from there, besides supplementation in the sun. If you're a protein eater and maybe less dairy, then, you know, stick with things like beef liver and salmon are great ways to get that into your system regularly. It is one thing to also be checking dosages with those to see, or testing to see what your blood levels are for proper dosing, to really dial in on where you need to be. So there's a couple things that are noted here in the slideshow that if you want to screenshot, if you like looking at, there's calculators there where you can calculate where it is you are, or if you know certain things, you can calculate some of your numbers to figure out where you need to be. Vitamin D dosing at 8,000 IUs a day. Most people, if they're taking a vitamin D supplement, it's got a couple thousand IUs. And the bare minimum someone should have a day is 2,000 IUs. I think in this day and age, they're saying that we're finding more deficient people in vitamin D, so that should be higher. There is a protocol that we have put together that we can easily, if you would like to see a nutritional or a supplementation protocol, that you can message or email back to Amanda that we can send to you, that is based on boosting immune system, and during COVID times, what we were doing and suggesting to people for their supplementation. When someone's battling something like that, they may be taking 25,000 IUs of vitamin D a day for a period of time. So there's a part of that to look at and to obviously be cognizant of how much you should take, but 1,000 to 2,000 IUs is just the super bare minimum that anybody should be doing in a healthy system, in a healthy body, a day. So again, we're finding that should be higher. Things for magnesium, you can do, you know, dark leafy vegetables is really a great place. Even juicing those where you're not losing the properties of them versus cooking things is a great way to get the sources of magnesium if it's not through supplementation. We see a lot of that magnesium come into play when people are dealing with diabetes or blood pressure issues too. So that's something to be aware of. Zinc is something else, as another mineral that the body needs for hundreds of processes it does every day. It's also really important in how it protects and preserves part of the epithelium, which is like the lining that you have in your respiratory system within your lungs. And it's helpful in preventing viral and bacterial stuff from entering it, and helps in, as it says there, decreasing that replication of a virus. So very effective in the immune function and preserving kind of that antiviral factor. So when we're talking about viruses, as much as we've had the last 2 years, that's a really important mineral to supplement with as well. Let's see. And, you know, even just some of the stats from the research that's been done more, in the last handful of years, the World Health Organization says that as the people do get tested for this, that almost a third of the world population is deficient in zinc. Why that is, I don't have that answer, but that's the stats from an organization that's watching and looking at those kinds of things. Even so much as doing zinc lozenges or some type of a oral uptake that way using a lozenge can be helpful if you're catching something quickly, and doing it at the first onset of feeling something coming on. You can even sometimes minimize that length of time that the body expresses that when you can up that amount early on in the exposure to something. We're going to go into more of talking about what I think has been coming to the surface more, and also more lately after COVID, but is a really big piece in showing where our immune system gets taxed. And I think it's worth spending the last few minutes talking about how in what COVID in a sense created or generated was a lot of isolation. A lot of people, not seeing or going anywhere outside of their homes or their very little bubble for a very long time. And so we're seeing the repercussions of that. And I think in looking at what that does to our immune systems, we talk about the leukocytes, so things in the body and that will show an increased expression for inflammation. And so then a decreased expression of the genes involved in having that antiviral response, right? And being able to combat the body having a response to something that's foreign to it. And so we know that the longer we have are in that, in a sense, loneliness type stage, and whether that is what we just experienced over the last couple of years for some people, or you just look at our older population. A lot of their immune systems are weaker as they are more isolated, as they don't get out and get to experience different things with different people, and have other things that are fulfilling for them, for their mental health, or even doing things that keep their brain stimulated. So that's a very big part of when our mental health is supported and stimulated in a way that keeps it, us having to use it and challenge it. It does a piece to supporting our immune system that way, by the way in which it responds to activity. And so just a decrease in activity sends the body into more of a, can be a more of a long-term fight or flight response. So a signaling that is stressed, then negatively over time affects the immune system and how well it can function. It can only stay stressed for so long. And then it creates that inflammation, and then a process that is hard to, in a sense, come out of, right? It gets weaker and weaker the less we challenge it or the less we give it what it needs. So there's a couple pieces there that address some areas of monitoring that and looking at isolation. So I think that that's a piece of us as we're hopefully coming out of that for good, noticing where the effects of that may have taken place, where some of those things may have been challenged. By being isolated doesn't necessarily mean our immune system then is going to be stronger. The more it's exposed to, the more strength it has to recognize different things that are foreign to it, right? So living in a bubble is not a solution for a healthy immune system. It's quite the opposite. And from this perspective, we had such a drastic place of isolation more socially that we have to look at that too. Mental health plays a big part in how obviously our brain processes, our brain does things, healthy or not healthy, or very minimal things when we're isolated versus a variety of activities, that it changes how our body responds to things. So that's how I wanted to wrap up the last few minutes of the workshop, is making sure that we're coming out of that isolation and spending time with people that matter. And that's why we are so excited that you are here joining us tonight, because you guys are who matter to us. And so give me 1 second. Is there any, I'm not going to go into the other slides that are into this because we have reached our time together. But anybody have any thoughts to that piece with the immune system, even if it relates to more of how the isolation factor of what we've had going on?
I had a question. So